And welcome. We'll try again. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our DWP Microlink webinar, which is now the third in a series of 9. I am absolutely thrilled today to have the fabulous Kate Nash with us. And really today's webinar brings together two exceptional voices who've been driving change in disability industry. So that's Kate Nash, OBE and founder and CEO of PurpleSpace, has been a trailblazer, fair to say, in empowering employees' networks for disabled staff with over a decade of work catalyzing thousands of voices across sectors to influence systems change, systemic change even. Her leadership has been responsible for reshaping how businesses understand lived experience as a driver for authentic, sustainable inclusion. Joining her, we hope, we have Michael Vermeersch, who's the global accessibility leader at Microsoft, whose work champions inclusive design and digital accessibility across the world's largest tech ecosystem. His leadership reflects Microsoft's deep commitment to accessibility as a core business strategy and oh gosh, I wish I could say half these words, sorry, an innovation imperative. And together, their achievements show why it's so important to acknowledge that we are indeed all in this together. So Kate, the fabulous Kate,
Tracy.
why did you set up PurpleSpace? What was the importance? What was the driver for you?
Wow, great question. Well, look, firstly, thank you so much for the invitation. It's lovely to see
Oh, thank you for coming.
Yeah, and it's lovely to be with this group of fantastic, I know I can see the numbers going up of individuals who, are, I suppose, driven like we all are in building a more inclusive working world when it comes to disabled people. I believe Michael is with us. I'm sure your colleagues are getting him into the room as we speak. So Tracy, to your question, so So I stood down as chief executive last year, but of course I founded the organization and we are now 10 years old.
10. Wow.
Our 10th year this year. And the purpose, the reason, the rationale for why I created this incredible community is because I saw a systemic need for people with disabilities, employees with disabilities, to, I suppose, organise ourselves better within employee resource groups, sometimes called networks, sometimes called special interest groups. But these are entities, these are vehicles. They're not destinations, they're places and spaces where employees with disabilities will come together and do two things. They want to support their businesses to go further, to go faster when it comes to building disability inclusion. But equally, they want to find ways by which we can sometimes build our inner confidence so that we feel better
Yeah.
to lean into the agenda and feel more able to be ourselves at work. Because the more we can share our unflinching stories, then the more likely it is that our employers feel the passionate need to drive change. So that was the reason, is really to amplify the voices of employees with disability to support their businesses to go further and faster.
Do you know, thank you for that. There was a phrase that you used when I first met you, what feels like decades ago now, at Business Disability Forum. And you talked about something that your mother had said to you that drove you on, about the soft bigotry of low expectation. And that, I mean, it gives me goosebumps now, but that stuck with me all of this time. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I've shared this story widely, Tracy, but I'm hoping
Mm,
it won't bore people too much. So, but let me, unpack that, because it is, you're right, it's a saying that means a lot to me.
mm,
So I'm a woman, unashamedly 61 years old now. I have had my own disability since I was 15. So,
mm.
decades. And for me, I acquired JCA, juvenile chronic arthritis, or Still's disease, one of the rheumatoid arthritis, at the age of 15.
Mm,
Time when I didn't expect to
of
acquire
course.
a disease that is so often associated with older age. But there's
Mm,
a moment when I was then using a wheelchair in the hospital. I'd been in hospital for about a year, and I was still ambulant, but for getting around, I needed to use a wheelchair in the hospital, and I couldn't walk very far, etc. And my mum watched me at the kitchen table looking through newspapers when I was thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? I still
mm.
I still do. But so this is way years before the internet, and I was just looking at jobs and descriptions as a way of understanding the types of jobs that
Mhm. Yeah.
I wasn't looking for a job at 15. I wanted to go to university. That's what I aspired to do. But mum watched me do this. She watched her daughter, and as I said, couldn't walk, couldn't dress myself, couldn't cut up food, etc. And she said to me, with love, Kate, it'd be fantastic if one day you could
Mm.
get a little job. And I riled against the word little. Now we joke now.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I still
Yeah.
have my mum,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
she
wonderful.
care home. She has dementia. She knows us as children. And I joke every time I tell this story, I pay her a little royalty to top up her pension. But I share this with love and with grace,
Mm,
because my mum was doing was what so many people do, is to reduce sometimes our expectations of what is
mm,
possible for
mm,
someone with lived experience of disability. And what we now call the soft bigotry of low expectation.
mhm.
So many employees
Yeah.
fail
Yeah.
as the first hurdle, even before they may ask for a workplace adjustment or accommodation. So it's part of our storyline, it's part of our backstory. What can we do to build our inner
Yeah.
confidence in order to secure sometimes the things that we need so that we can deliver well at work?
Thank you, because that leads in, and the reason I asked you to share that story was, one, there will be people who haven't heard it, and as I said, it stuck with me all these years because it's so very, very true, and it's part of why we talk about the importance of disability leaders and disabled leaders with lived experience who share their story as openly and as honestly as you do, to say this isn't about only young people, this isn't about a certain section. Disability affects all of us as we grow older, or the majority of us within our working age. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, whether you're Chinese, whether you're gay, straight. It will impact us. But without people like yourself speaking out, I mean, I still hate when I go and talk to clients. I don't really like to say I'm a disabled person. I am. All of mine are non-visible. They're all hidden. They do impact my day-to-day work, but it still feels a bit icky for me. But it's so important to get the leaders to say and to back this, isn't it?
Absolutely, Tracy. And you share a common truth, and
Mm,
give us are now very what I would call politicized with a small p. So
mm,
and the definition of disability. We understand where it sits as a human rights issue, as much as a charitable or a philanthropic one or a medical one, etc. And many of us will understand the social model like a stick of rock. If you snap, you and I, the word social model run through
yeah.
us. And yet we too have to, I suppose, make sense of a very sometimes challenging, sometimes hostile environment.
Mm,
And it's therefore necessary for us, with all of our experience, whether that be mental ill health, whether it's physical disability, whether it's a sensory impairment, whether it's neurodivergence, whatever our aspect of difference, if we can, if we can find a way, it's really helpful, useful, proper for us to lean into our leadership position,
mm.
because we then support those that come behind us. So, and I know Michael's with us now.
Hi, Michael.
Hey,
Welcome.
thank you. It was a good moment there because it said I was promoted as panelist, and I was thinking about this conversation here. I was thinking, like, how often is it that disabled people get promoted? I'm not sure whether we're supposed to ask the question.
Yeah, but do you know what? This is the basis of what we're talking about here, Michael. It's like, unless you're able to be open about what you need within your environment, you might not share or tell. And that's something I'd like to ask you about in a minute, Kate, the actual use of those words. people often use that disclose and declare, which actually I hate those, because it's got nasty connotations to it. But if you're sharing when you're going for a promotion, I mean, I'm aware of a couple of clients that don't make adjustments internally. They're brilliant for candidates coming through, but if it's a colleague that's going for a more senior role, they forget about the whole promotion thing and to make the adjustments they need to shine in that process. Do you talk about being disabled or having neurodivergence, Michael? Is that part of your shtick?
It's an interesting question. And I think we already had some, what already was discussed here, does shine through. So I'm well aware, and it's not going. I'm gaining disabilities as I get older. So I'm well aware that I have disabilities, and as I said, some I've been born with, and some I'm gaining as I get older and manage to survive and thrive. Touch wood. But do I talk about them? I think it's a very good point, and I haven't actually. Sometimes I wonder myself. I still have this is still a conversation I have to have with myself. At one point, I remember there was this kind of point. There was this kind of point in my career that you kind of got to this make or break thing where you say, you know what, you do realize that I'm being discriminated against,
Mm.
and let me tell you why. And this is the disability I have. And now that you know all these facts, do you now see what you've done wrong? And that was at that point I had to do this because it was that moment that, you know, that was make or break situation. And I'm not saying magically everything was fixed straight away, but in that process that followed, at one point, then somebody said, oh, maybe we should tell everybody that you are disabled. And I was thinking like, well, that's like telling everybody that I'm wearing a red sweater.
Mm.
How's that going to help?
Yeah.
That was my first gut reaction. Um, and oh well, you know, and then everybody knows, and yeah, and then knowing is one thing, and knowing what to do is another thing. That was already going in my head, and I think I phrased it as well. And I was like, if it's not relevant, I don't feel like it needs to be
Yeah.
discussed in the room
Yeah.
continuously. But if we already get to the point of having, by default, a proactive, inclusive culture,
Yeah.
where you can just, when you know, you can say, actually, that didn't work for me. Can we just change this? First of all, proactive offering. So you can say, yeah,
Yep.
I
Yep.
need this and this and this. But then also where you know it's going to be safe for you to say, oops, uh, can we have this? I don't know, can we have this bigger, or can we just
Yeah.
repeat this? Or can I have these transcripts while this is working?
Yeah.
Or can I have the slides back after this? Where we say, yeah, of course. And even at where you don't necessarily have to say why,
Mm.
on the
Yeah.
point of why, um, this is what I learned as a person with a disability. In general, in general, people are not there to block you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the plethora of things that humanity has to do, we all got loads of priorities, the dashboards is red and all that kind of stuff. People need to balance what they're going to give a priority to. If you give them a reason, then actually they might say, oh yeah, that makes sense. So where, for example, if I just say, let's say I need to go to an event, and I say,
Mm.
well, you know what, it would help me really if you give me directions and a bit of a clue what I'm walking into, give me
Mm.
some visual descriptions and all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if I just say it like that, chances are that the person organizing is saying, well, we've got lots of work still to do. This is going to be really tricky to give you this. I said, well, actually, it would help with my disability because already I got a lot of spoons to manage here, less energy. You can take all that away from me and you'll get more out of myself. And when you kind of then say it like this, and like, oh yes, of course. Sorry that we didn't think of
Yeah.
it like
Yeah.
that. And what I've seen then, so it takes a little bit of courage, it takes a little
Yeah.
bit of
Yeah.
vulnerability. But what I've then also seen and used this as a fist bump moment is that in the future, that often they then repeat this for everybody. So here you are as a disabled person, having a little bit of vulnerability and a little bit of courage, you could actually be change making the world and make it a better place by just saying how experiences can be better.
How
Now, that was
powerful is that, isn't it?
that's a very
Yeah. Yeah.
what you out there, which I
Yeah.
might have sidestepped. Do I tell people? Uh, I don't know. It's a continuous. It's a continuum.
Yeah.
I do not have a clear algorithm.
It's a really interesting thing because I think with Kate within the ERGs, I think one of the important things with people who have a disability, whether they're going to share it or not share it with an employer, is that they can self-advocate to Michael's point, isn't it? To really say, you don't necessarily have to say, and I've got type 1 diabetes and some mental health issues and various things with thyroid, all very exciting. And there are times, a bit like yourself, Michael, at the end of the day, I'm knackered. I've run out of spoons completely. So for myself, when I talk to my CEO, it's NASA, can I have speech to text software? Because actually I cannot type at the end of the day. I'm too tired. But do you find that, Kate, that self-advocacy thing is missing? Because I think that's what ERGs do really well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a huge fan of employee resource groups and networks, and Michael too comes from a heritage of a company that really supports their delivery, and I think where the sweet spot around
Mm,
employee groups is around the kind of congregating of positive stories about how you get in and how you get on at work.
mm,
Because it can be, as Michael's touched on, an enormously lonely thing to do as an
mhm.
individual, is to share your story in all its unflinching truth about the challenges.
Yeah,
But where employee resource groups come into their own is where that they can share stories of disability and difference in a way that supports a business to understand the things that then need to be done. So, there's no place for cathartic stories. Sometimes,
oh, yeah. Bleeding hearts and liberals, we don't need that. Yeah,
and we've all done it, we've all fallen
yeah.
into that because we learn over time how to share our stories better. So it has a
Mm,
start, a middle, and an end, so that we leave audiences with something to think, to feel, and
mm,
do as a consequence. And resource groups are able to do that, whether it's webinars like today, whether it's
mm,
learn, whether it's face-to-face or hybrid events, whether it's newsletters, whatever it is, whether it's a brown paper bag lunch where somebody will share their story to help managers understand what the adjustments and commendations might be of a.
yeah,
And I think that's really where they can provide huge leadership within an organization. They can sit on maybe councils, D, E, and I
yeah,
councils
yeah.
in. They can talk to senior colleagues and senior champions and allies. So it's the real stories, I think, that change the world.
Mm. And I love with some that I've seen in a local council, for example, quite a large government organisation. They've used the ERG skills to look at new buildings that they're moving into, to look at the physical adaptability of a building before they get in there. So, they've got all this free resource, which I disagree with it being free. That's a different kettle of fish. But they do have that knowledge built in, which I think is a wonderful resource for a business to tap into. And I think, Michael, in terms of Microsoft, I mean, Microsoft really, really, really get this. But why do you think they get it?
To just to caveat and clarify here, I think we're still on a journey, and I think we always will be on a journey
Mm,
because things change as well.
of course. Yeah.
Technology changed, the world changed, and then we get to situations where, oops, we missed that one. So we're far from perfection, but knowing that, and that's a great position to continuously get better as well, and get closer as well to your audience, to your consumers, to your customers. I think if so plus 20 years at Microsoft, don't tell anybody.
You're only
Might
12,
get paid out
Michael.
now.
Come on.
But I think in itself, where our mission statement has evolved, and I think the key trigger was when Satya Nadella came on board, and that was roughly in that 2016 area, where with him our mission statement also changed. But with Satya Nadella being a parent of a disabled child, that already brought
Yeah.
that lived experience
Yeah.
immediately into that leadership role, that knowing, okay, and as far as understood, Satya Nadella was also one of the first exec sponsors of the Disability Employee Resource Group at Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that was that made a huge difference there already. But then if you look at our mission statement, to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, break that down. And there was a huge debate, as far as understood. I wasn't in that room, far from, but that was a huge debate. I said, is it not too long and all that kind of stuff? And say, no, just has to have all these elements in it. And then if you look at this, every person, it doesn't say 50%. It doesn't
Yeah.
say that we're going to ignore, the 20% disability. It's
Yeah.
every person. And that
Yeah.
then gives us that accountability, but also that responsibility, and that we need to work at this. Now, if you want to work at this, there's a lot of stuff I'm saying here, a lot of concepts here. You need to
Yeah.
then have representation as well,
Mm.
because you can't do things for people. We need to do things with people.
Yeah.
So we need to have that representation. When do you get representation? Where people have that voice, and where they have that feel that they will be heard as well.
Yeah.
And all of that had to come, and that in itself, that has taken years as well to where we are now, where we're still learning and changing things. But the appointment of our chief accessibility officer, Jenny Leigh Fleury, came in, and that
Of
point
course.
as well,
Yes. Yeah.
where she then had that mandate to bring those changes as well, and shape that team around her who will be focusing on procurement, on focusing on marketing, focusing on our better products, and all of that kind of stuff. Where in the beginning, that was that hub and spoke model, where her team would provide the expertise. But what we're seeing
Yeah.
more and more is that those individual teams now saying, we got this, because
Oh,
we have
wonderful. Yeah.
disabled people in our teams,
Yeah.
because we have now learned all of that kind of stuff. And I'm making this sound easy, right? But it's, for example, our training, which is required for all employees on disability inclusion and accessibility, which we refresh as well, that we actually make publicly available so people can scrutinize that training, because sharing is not only caring, but it's also bringing that little bit of vulnerability and then getting that input as well. This can be better. Our training now includes AI as well, so we do not exclude new technology to the disability community, for example. But just hooking back to Kate before I forget, what I love, there's many things I love about PurpleSpace and the organization, the movement that she set up. But one particular thing that stood out, which I implemented myself with our communities, was the concept of confident conversations and all the aspects around this. And what do I mean by this? I'm sure Kate will, if this is a question, can say it better. But the thing here is, what I've noticed in my life and working in accessibility, shift left is not done fully everywhere yet, and we need to do that more, and that in so many aspects. So do it from the beginning, shift left. But for example, in education, where is disability in education? Where is the thought on how to have conversations around disability? What do you do? All of that kind of stuff. It's not part of that. As a guide dog puppy raiser, I go to the scouts and show, hey, this is about the guide dogs and blah blah blah, and they love it. But I'm saying, well, actually, I'm educating. This could be a school topic. Now, this could be a school topic, but the same thing for people with disabilities. They don't get a manual. They don't get taught on how to converse about disability either, share their disability and things like that. And with PurpleSpace and that concept of confident conversations, that they describe what confidence means. They describe the barriers you will face, how you overcome them, the barriers that you might face in your own head and how
Yeah.
to overcome them, all of that kind of stuff. And I think those things are really key because we still haven't normalized disability in all its aspects,
Yeah.
talking about it, what it is, having it shift left everywhere in product design and services, all of that kind of stuff.
For sure.
That's
I
a
mean,
bit here.
it's important, isn't it, to look at this thing holistically? But I think certainly without the will, I mean, I'm sure that Microsoft do a lot of stuff for philanthropic reasons,
But it's
but it's
business
business, isn't
benefit.
it?
Absolutely. So quickly have to say this, sorry, before I forget, because so to me, always when I have to say that and summarize it, there's two aspects. First of all, a lot of talent is out there, a lot of
Mm,
disabled talent that we can harness. They have different perspective, they bring innovation, all of that kind of stuff. Because they have those different views to life. All the barriers that they've seen, sometimes overcome, all of that kind of stuff. So they can give that better input in product design and services and access and all of that kind of stuff. So that talent perspective. Then the second, and then you also have that voice to represent. And my father, at 85, he's losing his vision and all of that kind of stuff. And I can show him, did you know Windows 11 his magnifier? And I didn't know this. It's like, so there's business benefit then there as well, where your customers, your consumers, you
mm,
are tapping into that market that disability represents. And again, just going to throw a stat in here, the average age of gaining a disability is 46.
mm.
And this is a club that, unless you die in full health, everybody's going to join. And you want that market share. You want to engage. You want
Of
those
course.
citizens that they can engage and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where there is talent. That's already a benefit for your organization. We also got research that if you focus on this, that overall your productivity goes up in your organization. Uh, People find a better place to work, more loyalty, all of that kind of stuff. And that's not just for the disabled employees. And then that extra market that you can tap into, 20%, what was a 297 billion pounds per annum in the UK alone. We could take some of that share, right? We
Yeah.
could use some of that flowing back into the economy.
Of
Uh,
course.
but these are your family, these are your friends, these are your connections, all of that kind of stuff that you start to include back into the service and products that you provide.
I love it because if any of you don't follow Michael on LinkedIn, give him a follow. There's always hints and tips about new products, how to get, your laptop working better. I mean, I'm going to look up magnifier now because I struggle with my glasses. We've got
Well,
small laptops, but it's
if
that sort of thing that people need to go into and have a look at. So we're
if you have
talking
with
about
Copilot
customers.
AI, you can now
We've got
start
Copilot.
saying, Copilot, I'm struggling seeing this. Can you help me?
I am
And it
loving that.
will point out either features in the operating systems or
Yeah,
say, hey, shall I show you how you can magnify this and
bless you.
provide
Thank
you
you.
training and all of that
I
kind of
am going to look how simple that is. But honestly, follow Michael for hints and tips. We had a question that I wanted to ask, if I may, for Kate. Susie Austin, apologies, I did mention about the eyes, didn't I? What are Kate's tips for building confidence within an organisation?
Good question.
Good question. And hello, Susie. A number of thoughts. The first is to understand the dynamic of trust. You know, we often feel sometimes that trust is one way, but it's a two-way street. And, you know, Tracy, earlier you were talking about that dynamic of disclosure or declaration, and I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with words, as you know, much prefer self-identifying with disability or sharing personal information.
yeah.
So the first is to really understand, as an employer, you really got to understand what that dynamic means. In a publication that PurpleSpace produced a few years back called the 5 Trust Tests, we offer
Mm,
5 things that employees with disabilities look for before they choose to share information about their disability. So some of those things were: 1, an identified and named senior business leader, particularly somebody who is leading the march on accessible technology. You know, of course, Michael knows all about this, but if you're a firm where that's not your product and services, if you've got a senior business leader whose responsibility is to ensure that they are constantly reviewing and auditing all aspects of tech, and that named business leader is known to others, then the magic starts to happen. Well, that's the first.
mm,
I think secondly, having an easy to use, visible workplace adjustment process or policy.
mm,
I know Microlink has just partnered recently with Susan Scott Parker to produce a fantastic publication called Everyone Wins a Balloon, which offers up some of the central principles upon which you can create a workplace adjustment.
mm,
To Susie's question, I think if a company has really got that nailed, timelined, simple process, very visible, etc., again, that builds trust and confidence. And then one of the, again, central ways by which you can build inner confidence is learning directly from your own people. And I know, of course, many employers, part of the disability confidence scheme, they're not global multinationals. So the numbers don't always stack up, and therefore they don't always have a network of people with disabilities.
yeah.
But instead, you could have maybe listening groups, for example. You might hold an annual, I don't know, virtual coffee, where the chief executive says, I just want to hear from my own people about what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, so that I can support to build that into the long-term plan. And then the other way, to Susie's question of building confidence, and to Michael's point, and thank you, Michael, for calling out our Confident Conversation series. I'm a huge fan. So we're doing a podcast series. We've got lots of resources. But we went on a walkabout to find out, what does confidence really mean for individuals? Because we often think confidence is either a fact, you've got it, or you have
Yeah.
a feeling, yeah, or it's an act. And we realized it's both none and all of those things. But if you position confidence as a strong expectation of a positive outcome, what that means, you're actually giving your employer a huge um, uh, plus point, because you might be dealing with maybe a line manager who is not altogether au fait with what workplace adjustments. But if you assume the best and you assume good intent, even if you're up close and personal, perhaps to somebody who doesn't understand and has got that red dashboard that Michael calls out so well, you know, you have to come from a place that everything is possible, and that you were hired for a reason. And if you've been working there for 12 years, then there's going to be a way forward. So Susie's question is about the things that organizations can do to build trust constantly and to review that dynamic, and things that individuals that we need to do, because we have agency, we have sovereignty, we have skin in the game. We can't just leave it to our employers. You know, I wish the world worked like that, but it doesn't. It does require us sometimes to find the courage, and I recognize that's very difficult, particularly, I think, those of us who may be newly diagnosed, or we're struggling, or we might have a life-limiting condition, or we're simply carrying the weight of sadness. You know, these things are hard, but if we can, we have to, I think, honor ourselves and understand that we can build out inner confidence to get what we need. I hope that answers it, Tracy.
Yeah, I think it does, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've had a lot of comments on the Q&A bit about people would like to have an open discussion that involved all the people that are attending, as well as yourselves talking. And certainly, if people have got questions that they want answered live, please stick your mitt up, because we would love to answer the questions. But it is very much that looking at disability confident as an actual scheme, as opposed to confidence, as Kate's just described it. The confident process, the scheme process that DWP run, is really good for giving you a framework to work from. It covers the basics. Are you doing workplace adjustments? Are you looking after the mental health and well-being of your colleagues? Show us you're doing it, and do regular surveys to measure. Because without having the facts and the figures, you can't prove the efficacy of anything that you're doing. Well, in my opinion, you can't. So it's really nice to be able to say, we started at point A, we're now at point B 12 months later, and involve your senior leaders to say, this is what's working, this is what isn't working. But having that open conversation. And we don't see a great deal of that, apart from where you've got a really good ERG. And in those companies, things thrive. You see things really, the dial moving quite substantially. I mean, I was talking to a lady from Devon in last month's webinar, and she was saying they're just setting up a neurodivergent ERG internally. And what they found is that they collectively get together and say, well, these are the things that work for me. So they're having a private conversation. They're not talking to the employer, but like-minded with like disabilities, although neurodivergence isn't a disability, but you know what I mean, like conditions. They're talking about, well, Copilot works brilliantly. It's a game changer for organizing my day. You know, sensory readable and sensory scribe, fantastic. Have you seen this? Have you seen that? So all of a sudden we're educating our peers, which I think is an important part of what we do, because then we can then, as peers, go back to the leadership team and say, we really need this to shine within the organization.
There's an added aspect to what you said here as well now. I'm still talking about COVID.
It's
COVID
still
often comes
around.
up, but we kind of had the world change then, where we all had to work from home, and that's a story in itself. And then we got in that we no longer have to work from home, so we get into this hybrid ecosystem where, you know, some organizations have come fully back to the offices, but most organizations are working in a hybrid fashion. But that's then where, again, in those changes, that we see in the community saying, well, that didn't work, or this hybrids coming together, all hands, that didn't work. You were putting up a quiz for the fun, but it wasn't accessible and it was way too fast, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and the mere fact that the community is, oh, for you too, that didn't work, they feel then that they can have that conversation, bring it up. You know what, next time when you do a quiz in a hybrid fashion, could you then please do it like this and this, so we actually also can win a prize? Thank you very much. And that is where those communities, that discussion is really important. And that in itself is already one of the reasons why you should have employee resource groups, where they can actually compare and say, oh, and also share hacks then. That's like, well, this worked for me. We should share that to everybody. Maybe we need to share that to the organizers, that if they tell people, everybody this, they can have a better experience.
Yeah.
And this is then where we got to handbooks, where we say, you know what, if you want to do an inclusive meeting, these are all the points that we
Yeah.
think that you really should be doing, and tell people that there are captions, and tell them they're over there. And when you describe a slide, don't just assume that everybody understood what the slide means. Don't just use color to indicate whether something is good or bad. Use more than just colors, all of that kind of stuff. So that's then where you get to those better practices. But it's
Yeah.
really key to have those groups, those communities, to be able to have that discussion, especially because we're still working in changing circumstances continuously
Yeah.
as well.
And that's the reality, isn't it? Because life is moving so quick. Kate, we're talking about the importance of disabled leaders, but how can employee resource groups, for example, how can you actually help to support and develop disabled leaders and create more of them? How are you going to inspire the guys that are perhaps sitting in a back office somewhere thinking, I don't really want to put my head above the parapet. I don't really want to be seen. How do we do that?
You talk about disabled leaders. How do we encourage?
Yeah.
There's a number of ways. We in PurpleSpace are seeing grow like topsy the amount of senior disabled people who are becoming employee resource groups. There are those that became resource group leaders and then they went on to the most incredible jobs and hold positions of real influence. Michael, for example, mentioned Jenny Lay Flory, for
Yeah.
incredible woman at Microsoft, both internally and externally. You look at Sam Latif, for example, Procter and Gamble,
Mm.
started life as a, I think, a product manager. She was an employee resource group leader, and she's a blind woman, and she is able to influence the business, for example, to build accessible shampoo and conditioner bottles. For example, she created a real movement inside Procter and Gamble to ensure that they were delivering products for their visually impaired customers who may not be able to differentiate in a shower, for example, the difference between a conditioner bottle and a shampoo bottle. And she was able to support a business case to reconfigure all of the manufacturing to do that. So to your question, I think one is to showcase the careers, the extraordinary careers that we are seeing disabled people have in the business community. We often hear that there is not enough of us in work, and that's a truth. We hear about the challenges that politicians around the world are having on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear about welfare reform, particularly here in the UK. So in some places it's a dim and dismal story, but I see the opposite at PurpleSpace. I'm very lucky and honoured, and we are in a privileged position to see the extraordinary careers of some very successful, very influential disabled people. So I would say bring them into your companies. Recognize that, for example, disability confident companies in the UK are often smaller companies. They're at the SME level. But, we like to talk about ourselves as human beings. So why not invite one of the ERG leaders in from another organization to share a little bit
Cracking idea
about what they're doing? And then that might support individuals who have not been so out and loud and proud about their experience. They're working the back office in accounts. They're back office in research, etc. But they get closer to others with extraordinary careers. So I would sow the seeds. I bring into the companies and have a little speeching session, hybrid session, and encourage your people to feel expectant and positive and optimistic about their careers.
I love that. I think that's a really cracking, low-hanging fruit, to use such a cliche, but isn't it? To invite somebody in that has that knowledge and share the knowledge. Thank you. We've got a question from Lavanya for Michael. Michael, Lavanya asks, is how do employees at Microsoft know what AI and other support is available for them? How do you get the messaging out and the story out to colleagues?
Very good question. If I have, it doesn't always work like that, but if I can give advice on how best to do it,
Yeah, please.
in a way, this is change management. So you need to you're changing habits, right? And that's the same thing. We've seen that with AI, that we have to push ourselves a bit to then converse with Copilot and see what happens when we do that, and shape our engagement with Copilot, etc. Now, what has happened at Microsoft is we, the Disability Employee Research Group, were one of the first users to receive AI. So in that sense, we were very rapidly involved. But adoption change management, we got we were there to what the ProSci adoption change management, which is an acronym which is kind of easy. ADKAR. So awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. Did I say that too fast? So shall I just awareness?
Say that one again, please.
Okay. So awareness, first of all, people need to know, and this is what it can do, all that kind of stuff. But then there's desire. What's in it for you? That is really key as well. If you want to change people's habits, what's in it for you?
Yeah.
And then you need to start working on the knowledge aspect, training, provide people training on how to do things and what have you. But that will only go, and these steps are very sequential. Training goes much better when people know what's in it for you. This is why you should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you get to that point of ability where you start sharing, hey, I mean, only today, and I share that back with the team. I was asking Copilot, I needed to go to a place. I was asking Copilot, hey, can you help me? I need to get to this place. And actually what it says, oh, I opened on your phone, I opened an app which will show you where it is.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
And so I was surprised myself. I said, well, next thing I'm going to ask you is to make a pizza because my oven is actually connected to the internet. So, I
Oh
mean,
my word.
anyway, sorry. Let's go back from the pizza. Let's go away from the pizza. So you start sharing those success stories already. So
Yeah.
people really go further than the training and they share with each other that things. So that's the ability part of ADKAR. And then the reinforcement. Now the reinforcement, and I find this really key as well in this ecosystem of employee resource groups. Give yourself a pat on the back. Celebrate when you achieve something. And I can even be a micro step,
Yeah.
right? Because this is a tough journey. And that is really, that is what makes reinforcement, because like, oh yay. So that then gets you back to that, right? Have we done all these steps? Okay. Because that's what and us being humans, we need to give ourselves a little bit of help in changing habits. So that reinforcement, that celebration, maybe a bit of gamification. Hey, who's got the best prompt with AI and gets the who's done this super thing today with a you get the token prize of today, for example. So that's that reinforcement, for example. So it's change management. So that's that. And I think there was a second part of the question, wasn't there? How we get AI to our disabled communities. What was the other thing?
It was kind of, they wanted to understand how you actually get the information out to employees to understand that
Right.
it's there.
Okay. Part of the change management principle is that you need to tell people the same message 5 to 7 times.
So once doesn't do it.
No. And
Okay.
you got that with PurpleSpace as well. That's why you need
Yeah.
before it sinks in and becomes a habit as well. And I've learned, because I'm in marketing, there's something extra. You need to say people that's those messages in 5 to 7 different ways as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is why you do
So
a newspaper,
49 odd messages.
a
You've got to think about
newsletter.
it then. Okay.
That's why you do a
Yeah.
newsletter. That's why you
Yeah.
do a webinar. That's why you do a TV advert. That's why you do
Ah.
you have a leadership message saying, you should be doing this. All of that kind of stuff. So you get it in different ways. And why is that? Because we're not always there. That's one thing.
Yep.
But
Yep.
also we're not always digesting things in the same way.
Yep.
And that's and also it's about changing habits. And that's why you really need to get a bit immersive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Because
That's
of the
really interesting.
dashboard.
Yeah, no, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm conscious of time here, and I kind of wanted to ask both of you, and if we can start with you, Kate, in terms of future trends and innovation, what role does leadership play in driving trends and innovation in the field of disability inclusion? And how can we really move the conversation forward? Because this I'm still having the same conversations. You've been doing this a hell of a lot longer than me, but I'm sort of 15 years in on this and I'm still having the same conversations. How do we help leaders to move the dial?
I think one role that leaders now play is to what I would call normalize the challenge. So back in the day when we first started, we knew as a fact that the perception of cost, for example, was getting.
Mm,
So we know that the cost of an average adjustment, I know Microlink has done some fantastic work on
mm,
other organisations, and it's, I don't know, I'm going to get the maths wrong, something like £750 for the
mm,
average workplace adjustment. But back in the day, we were told and we knew that the perception of the cost was much higher, and it was one of the barriers to business leaders leaning in to this topic. I think now that has changed. And I absolutely adore Michael's phrase. I'm going to say it again. The dashboard is red. I love it. I still. So,
Borrow
Michael,
with pride. Borrow with pride. Yeah,
you might say
absolutely.
in a forthcoming book, I might just snuffle that, because I think that is the issue right now. We live in a complex, supercharged digital.
Mm,
And there's a huge amount of complexity in terms of how you lean into the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's noisy and it's crowded and it's messy and it comes with lots of suppliers, etc. And I think that's the biggest issue that leaders face. It's how can they simplify through that very heavy noise and say with unequivocal conviction, this is necessary, this is here to stay. You know,
mm, yeah.
politicians at whatever part of the pond. And these are the very simple things that we are going to do as a business. So we're going to sign up to the Disability Confidence Scheme. We're going to have an easy to use workplace adjustment process
Mm,
that comes with service level agreements. And we're going to
yeah.
run a storytelling campaign this year where we showcase the stories of 20 people. So it's about
Mm,
keeping it still simple. That's where, and it's not that innovative, and yet it is. It's keeping it simple, getting through the noise on that red dashboard and making it easier for people to feel good about what is also a moral imperative. You know, so many people experience disability or difference at some part in their life, as we know. So, you know, why not learn that skill as you're going up the greasy pole?
But isn't it true that it's never just disability? It's the intersectionality of what we're
Mm.
looking at. We're never just one thing. We're never just sort of white females. We're never straight or gay or non-binary. There's so many different challenges, but we all more want that human aspect from our employees. And certainly the Gen A, Gen Z and Gen A coming through are demanding it. You know, there's no longer this kind of the space to say, well, you're coming in, you're going to be working 80 hours a week for 40 hours pay and you're going to love it. You know, everybody's got to change, I think, as far as this market is going and what's happening. But the same sort of question to you, Michael, if I may, around, you know, how leaders can ensure that their organizations stay ahead and continuing to improve their disability inclusion practices. How do they keep it fresh? How do they keep it new? How do they move it from, well, we've done it, haven't we? Isn't that great?
Wow, have you done it?
Have you done it? It's a great question. Yeah. And that's
So,
the
so,
basis. Yeah.
so definitely making sure that your ERG is empowered and that voice is there. That has to be part of it. Um, and even there, when we produce our products, we yes, we use the voice of our disabled employees, our employee resource group, but we also, rely on disabled testers to test our products and things like that. And we don't, employees in your employee resource groups have another often a day job as well. So that's not necessarily their day job. So making sure that disability is represented in the early stages, that shifts left again. But for leaders, so that will help leaders to continue to be innovative in themselves, because we've shifted left the organization. But what I've seen, and I've put in presentations now from Jenny Leigh Fleury, she has a dashboard. So we measure continuously where we are
Interesting.
and how well things are going. And and give the example of AI. In the beginning, when you would say to Copilot, I got loss of vision, can you help me? Or got hearing loss, I need this kind of help. It would first apologize. That was so wrong. And it's thanks to one, we had a feedback mechanism already in our product, but thanks to that voice, that people with disabilities who felt that they could exercise that voice, we had that safe space and things like that. That's not on. We don't need an apology. Thank you very much. We thought, because it's a learning model, the AI that's not on, you move on from that. It's like, and it no longer does that. And it was a couple of months before everything got sorted, but it doesn't do that anymore. And that in itself is, innovation. We didn't think necessarily on how much AI would mean for people with disabilities, but now we're seeing this more and more. But we also see that, and even in this space, we did see there's a lot of bias in here. And again, how do we make sure that that bias is gone? And again, having that, doing things with people for disabilities, keep you continuously on that, having that voice, those eyes, all of that, those critical friends, so to speak, present in your innovation processes. Give you one quick example. Going to give you, I do the finance at home. I'm disabled. I register myself with a utility provider for once, because normally I don't, that I was disabled. I was going to get my my boiler had packed up. I phoned them, my boiler packed up. Can I get an engineer? Because I had assurance with them. And they asked me all the standard questions and then say, we see you're registered disabled. Don't know if you've seen the Disney movie, loads of people having parties in my head. Yay, I'm going to have a quicker service. And then the person could say, could I speak with the responsible homeowner, please?
No. Oh,
Why
my
did that
word.
happen? Because they
my
didn't
word.
have the eyes and the voice of disability throughout their processes, who could say, you know what, people with disabilities can be responsible homeowners
Wow.
as well. Thank you very much.
Wow. Michael, that's a great story to end that bit on. I'm going to sum up in the next couple of minutes just to say I think some of the key takeaways from this is really to look at getting employees together into ERGs. Please reach out to PurpleSpace, Brendan Roach or Sally Anna Owen, who work beautifully around this whole topic. Get hold of Kate's books, which is Secrets and Big News. In the midst of writing a new book now, I'm waiting for a novel to come out, Kate. I reckon you've got a couple of saucy ones in there somewhere. But very much look at sharing the knowledge within your own organizations, using Disability Confident as a framework to drive change. Look at the excellent example from Michael through Microsoft to say they do it not just because it's the right thing. You're saving human capital, you're saving money, but you're also actually making money. So don't forget the people that are buying your products, not only working for you, but I always remember, and I can't remember his name, Phil, and I'm looking at Kate, the wheelchair user chap, he's fabulous. Who?
Your friend.
That's it, Phil Friend, bless you, thank you. Had a senior moment then. Phil Friend saying that his family would not go into a shop that didn't have accessibility for him in his wheelchair. So they not only lost his business, but they lost the whole family's business as well. So, it's your clients, it's your candidates, and it's your colleagues. So look internally for your disabled colleagues, grow them, respect them, give them training, give them support to become the future leaders, to support everybody as it goes on with their lived experience. So I wanted to say thank you so much to Kate and to Michael. Brilliant to have you both here. I wish we could stay on and chat and have pizza, Michael. If you could send that instruction to my oven, and preferably send the ingredients as well, that'd be wonderful. Thank you ever so much. We'll be sending the resources out. If there's anything you want to know, please catch up with Michael, catch up with Kate, catch up with myself, and we will see you in a month's time. Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye.